Love is in the air. We are here at Friends Talking Nerdy. Thank you for joining us for another episode. This is Tim Jousma. Joining me all the way in Portland, Maine, we have the holiest of holies. It is the Reverend Tracy. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty swell, Tim. We have officially had our first snow today. And I know, I mean, we've kind of let on before that sometimes when we get opportunities, we will record a few episodes in advance.
Mhm.
And with the Mr. Reverend being out of town, we are so taking advantage of just the cold weather and my being home and doing that this week. So I realize the snow news will be a little old by the time it comes, but we did have our first flurries that I got to see from my building in downtown Portland, Maine, which is just beautiful.
Mhm.
In a way, it took me back because I was one of those people that I got to work in downtown Portland, Oregon, like kind of during the prime years in 2015. Things were still really great down there and that kind of magic of being over Pioneer Courthouse Square. So it
Mhm.
was a little bit of a nostalgia like tug at my heart. But yeah, so it's actually really stinking cold right now. Big notable difference from Portland to Portland is that there are actually snow management vehicles like out there. I think I passed more on the drive home than I saw the entire time I lived in Oregon. So that's like kind of cool and gives me some reassurance because that was something that I was a little nervous about coming here. But yeah, so that's what's going on today. It's freaking cold and I'm experiencing my first flurries of the season. How about you, Tim? How's your day going?
Yeah, I mean, another red letter day for me. As far as winter weather here, it is definitely on the rainy side of things, so no snow as of yet. I would have been shocked if they did not have, like snow plows or, like salt trucks or anything like that in Maine, just because, I mean, as we both know in Portland here, when the snow hits, it hits for 1, 2 weeks, so it would cost more in upkeep to have salt truck snow plows than it would be to just let it do its thing and shut down for a couple of weeks.
Oh,
So
exactly. It's really more fiscally responsible to just, I mean, even from companies at that point, like, but overall, it's just not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze there, but it's definitely, it was full force today and we're just like, it was barely flurries.
mhm.
So it kind of put my mind at ease there. But so what's the weather like there? Like you guys haven't come close to snow yet, right?
Yeah, no, no. I mean, it's obviously a lot of rain, a lot of a downcast feel, perfect weather for me, I guess. But yeah, I have not heard any reports yet as to when the snow is going to occur. I mean, like my first couple of years here, December was the time when the snow hit, but like last year, wasn't it like February? I think when it hit. Yeah.
It possibly, and I don't even recall if it stuck that much. It just because I didn't go anywhere. With the
Mhm.
pandemic, it was even more not noticing the snow than ever. Because when I worked in tech, I would just, you start taking your laptop home, like when
Mhm.
it looks like it's cold. We just check the weather, and even sometimes we'd get an email saying, "Hey, you might want to take it home." And that was kind of the cool thing, right? Because instead of making people come in, you could give them the heads up the day before and say, like, "Hey, sorry guys, science has helped us be able to get better about this. Can you just take your laptop home and just plan to do at least a little bit of work from there?"
Yeah.
So going from that to nothing to now kind of being in an area where I have a job where physically I do kind of need to be there for the most part to do my job because I take care of the office. That's what I do.
There you
But
go.
there's elements of it that can be done remotely, but for the most part, I'm expected to kind of be there. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out for me.
Oh, I hated that too. I mean, because like the retail jobs I had, like it didn't matter if it was like a blizzard and the snow was like going horizontal because the wind is so bad, you had to be there no matter what.
And what's sad is people would shop. Like there were people willingly going to spend money. I still remember when I worked at a shoe store
Mhm.
back in college and I had opted to stay over winter break. At that point I had stopped like going back to my parents' area for Christmases and stuff.
Mhm.
So it was like one of the homes I was adopted into, one of my first adopted families to take me in and let me live with them for a short stint. But yeah, it was like Black Friday. So, and we got this freak storm that hit Lubbock, Texas.
Mhm.
And I called and they're like, "Nope, you still need to be here at 4 a.m." So, and I mean, at that point, even in Lubbock, Texas, they would plow, the loop system, because
Right.
it wasn't a big enough place. Like, it wouldn't have been as intricate as trying to plow like the Dallas system. Because if you're curious about that, go check out like the freeway system in Dallas. It is insane. Like, Lubbock, Texas has one little loop that goes around it. I think they've now built something since I lived there, but back then just one big loop. And I had to take it because the
Mhm.
place I was staying, like, they were kind of out in the sticks a little bit. So I get up there, and that was the first time I ever had my almost, like, I think I almost died situation, because I did lose control of my vehicle. I spun around 3 times. I wasn't going fast. It was very slow, but it just felt really intense because,
Yeah.
like, you've lost control of your vehicle. And fortunately, the person behind me was able to, brake and stop, and they stopped about like 2 feet from my car,
Mhm.
which, normally doesn't sound like that much, but in a snowy, icy situation, that's like kind of, oh, thank God, like, level of they didn't hit me. So yeah, like, that's part of what makes me a little bit nervous about the weather here. But it goes back to kind of comforting. I'm not in that situation. I'm not doing retail. But yeah. And then I go there, by the way, and there were shoppers. But because of course it was Black Friday. But there's other situations where I'm like, are people really gonna come shop in this? Because it's like Tuesday in the middle of like February. And yeah, they do. It's insane to me.
Yeah, and then they will also have the nerve to yell at you for the long, arduous trip it took to go into a place like the Apple Store or something like that, totally discounting the fact that me as the retail person also had to take an arduous trip to deal with a piece of shit that's yelling at me, you know?
Yeah, right. It's like you kind of want to quit back, and it's like, oh, you had to come here to deal with me. Well, I had to come here to deal with you, and I'm sure by the end of the day, about like 20 more of you.
That would have been a good day at Apple because of all the people that were there. But that's a different story for a different therapist, I guess. So. Now, one thing before we get into the festivities today, we wanted to bring up a little article I came across about shenanigans that are happening in Missouri. And yeah, you've read a little bit of the article. And basically, what it's telling is that I guess at some point this year, the governor of Missouri asked a study to be made in the towns in Missouri that have an active mask mandate to see their effectiveness. The study was completed, and it showed that when you wear a mask, you can successfully prevent this pandemic from spreading, and you can actively help the neighborhood. And what did the Republicans in Missouri do? They hid this report.
Yeah, that seems to be, I mean, and granted, sure, hiding does kind of do that thing that I try not to imply people's intentions, but at the very least, they were not forthcoming with it. And either way you look at that, that's kind of bad. Like, to choose to not provide information that's life-saving to
Yep.
the populace that would be easy to provide, right? It's not like maybe even as near as like a decade ago where, it might not been as easy because not everybody's on email and not everybody checks these things.
Mm-hmm.
But now, with how much people consume and kind of use social media, the good and the evil sides of that to get their news, it just seems odd. Like, what's the excuse? It's not like you didn't know how to get the information out. So to
Yeah.
just actively decide to not give it to somebody is, to me, as bad as hiding it. Because to me, hiding it would almost imply that they were actively doing something to, maybe skew the data, or they tried to run another test with some biased like tones set to some of like the parameters. But they're not doing that. They're not even trying to rearrange the information to make it look better, which is a tactic a lot of people do when a study shows something that they don't like.
Right.
They just went, well, we can't do any of that stuff, so don't give it to anybody. Like, I don't get the decision, other than I guess that.
And yet, Republican citizens in that state will probably, for the most part, not see a problem with that. I To me, logic says when a politician of any party makes a decision like this that negatively affects the health of the people in your state, they no longer deserve to be in power. Again, regardless of the political party here, the fact that oh, like again, this is we could be a lot further along than we are, simply because Republicans want to kill people. I mean, that's being a little hyperbolic, but when they are actively preventing studies like this from reaching the public eye, when they're actively encouraging their voters to ignore the advice from medical professionals, they're looking to get people killed. They want chaos so that come 2022, 2024, they're able to say, see, Biden didn't fix it.
Oh, yes. There's actually, and I kind of wish I had noted like the names I was driving home, but there is another like type of situation like that where there's a Democrat that wants to be up for re-election and has tried to put something across. And essentially, the going theory is that even though they're offering something that the GOP side would want, that they don't want to work with her because part of their big campaign against her is basically not having success.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, it goes back into that we pick political popular over what's actually right for our society. And that really kind of sucks to watch. Like I was listening to something, actually, here's something I guess I could talk specifically about. I guess one of the main reasons that Biden won't mandate needing vaccine status or a test for domestic flights. And the quote that I got from it was that it was not because it wouldn't help us a lot here. He wasn't doing it because it wasn't, quote, politically popular. So this is now a term that my head is glammed onto. And it just goes, if it's not politically popular with your base, you don't want it out there, you don't want to support it, and you don't want to try to change their minds, especially once the public has already decided, because then you're at risk of being a flip-flopper for anybody that remains stuck to their guns on it. So it's really kind of a weird standoff in politics. It's some
Yeah.
of the stuff that is the reason that I bowed out of a lot of following it so hard. Like I do agree that it is your responsibility, especially if you are an active voter, that you should somewhat have your finger on the pulse. But because of just how gnarly it gets, again, we're picking popularity contest over a thing that could actually help us. And that's the thing that just really kills me about it.
Yeah, and all this is benefiting are the extremely rich in this country, and like, why don't average citizens wake up to that fact? It seems like every single decision politically that has had any sort of major effect in this country since the Reagan era, at least, has been done to support the billionaires and trillionaires in this world. And we need a revolution. We do.
Oh gosh, I thought it was funny because because it's that kind of time of year they're starting to talk to people who have just won little things or been elected. And there was one that's she just got elected to be a mayor of like somewhere south of Portland, Maine over here, so in Maine, and she's an immigrant, and I had to giggle, just that cynical part of my brain giggled because she had mentioned specifically that her family, they're immigrants. So she's actually the first of her nationality, they think, to become a mayor in the United States. So I do kind of want to find this story because it was interesting. I have it tagged to look up what was playing on the way home. But yeah, she was talking about her family had chosen to, come to the United States because they could tell that their country was going to have a civil war. They didn't know when it was going to happen, but that it was probably going to come. And I went, oh, wouldn't that be ironic?
Yeah.
Because there are people who speculate that we're that divided at this point that we stand kind of at risk to be at that point.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned with the Rittenhouse thing, I mean, like, we have situations in this country where people are actively throwing gasoline on the problem, and it's just going to take one spark. It's just hopefully we don't get to that point. I mean,
Yeah.
we've already faced an insurrection on Capitol Hill, so like, so thinking that, thinking my what I am, I feel horrible that I think that it could possibly happen. I wish I could just, say I'm being overreactive, I'm being hyperbolic, but like when you saw what you saw on January 6th, it's like, what won't the Republicans do?
Well, and it even goes to the point of looking at your office cooler talk. Like, nobody can be friends across the aisle anymore. Like, it's so far divided that it's permeated into our everyday. And to me, that's the more telltale sign
Mm,
that, we stand to be at risk for this. And then that even leads you to, well, great. So that means that there are people that are in either side of the party that might not even be advocating for things because they're trying to manipulate and control their base, but rather they actually do believe those things. And when you're somebody that requires like a certain level of logic and science and some troubleshooting, like that kind of is a scary idea for me. It's
yeah.
it's scarier for me, I think, for them to actually believe it than it is for them to be manipulating people. Is that weird? Am I alone in that one? Like, am I the only one that thinks it's scarier for them to actually believe some of the stuff they say?
The conservative citizens, yes. I mean, as far as the politicians in this country, I think there are politicians that are stoking the flames, and yes, there are liberal ones that do it too. For any conservatives in the audience, I'm not naive to that fact, but
Yes.
yeah, you
And
had
we all
to.
know I've been super open about how I feel about it. It's like, oh yeah, there's a fair amount on both sides that like they all need to be sat down and taught how to like be with people again.
Yeah.
Um, but I do before we get off of this topic and move on to Big Mouth though, I did want to talk about kind of the cool nerdy stuff about the study, like
Hmm.
just to actually go into it because it is really interesting information. And I'm sure Tim has already shared this article and he'll probably share it somewhere else again, I'm sure.
Yep.
But two little paragraphs that I think really just sum it up really well. Because if you want to read more about it, take the probably what maybe 5 minute read most and go through it. But if you wanted to know what it showed, so essentially, the statewide data shows that from the end of April to the end of October, jurisdictions with mask mandates experienced an average of 15.8 cases per day for every 100,000 residents, compared to a 21.7 case per day for every 100,000 residents in unmasked communities. And so yeah, like it's basically they're doing masked and non-masked as masked mandates. So of course, the one thing that I would want to think about immediately when I think about like data and how you pull it and these studies and things like that, and maybe this just comes from, I had to study how to do studies when I was in school for psychology, is I wonder if they've accounted for like any of the communities who were already wearing masks
Hmm.
like in spite of it. You know what I mean? Because that's something that immediately when you read stuff like what can skew it are good things to think about. So that's where I would want to go find this original study, like personally, and see if they did account for that. But and then somebody actually like kind of wrote to succinctly put it out there. And I liked that they do this because you don't always get this when somebody like kind of gives their opinion about a study. They just kind of say, well, I agree that it proves this, and they won't give you any deets. So here
Hmm.
was another great succinct paragraph, and then I'm cool. Those are the two things I kind of wanted to share. Um, I think we can say with great confidence, reviewing the public health literature and then looking at the results in your study, that communities where masks were required. Wow, communities where masks were required. Sorry, that was weird to read. Had a lower positivity rate per 100,000 and experienced lower death rates, was the other interesting part that wasn't picked up in the first half.
Yeah.
So, if you were already on the fence of whether or not masks are working, there does seem to be like some legitimate stuff out there saying that it works. Because, hey, here's the great news, guys, you can wear them even if they're not mandated. You're totally allowed to pop that sucker on and walk in the store. They won't stop you or look at you weird or anything really. I mean, granted, maybe in smaller towns they will, but then you can take in your per capita, like your population density with
Hmm.
where you're at. But if you're in like a bigger town or if you're going into the grocery store at a bigger town, maybe that's like a great time to mask up, even if you don't generally, because you're not around a lot of people during your day. So, lots of good news for that out there for people who are either wanting more information to decide whether or not they should still be wearing masks, or people who have just been like me, continuing the practice because there's really been nothing saying to stop. Like the entire time on the CDC's website, it's kind of recommended mask wearing. So, personally, I never stopped. Yeah, so yay, there's a victory. There was a study that was discovered. It sucks that we had to find it,
Yeah.
but it's out there. And that's, I think, a really cool takeaway from this one is at least the info's out there now.
Yes, I mean, and more than anything, mask up when you go out. I mean, I think that a face mask is going to be a part of my wardrobe for the rest of my life. I mean, just like when you go through a pandemic like this, it's like it opens your eyes at just how like unthinking, I guess, you were in the past before, like how easy it is to get sick, and like, I've talked to people that, have talked about like normal flu season, like you would get in like at a big company has like severely dropped because masks.
I know, that's insane. Like, I think that's
Mhm.
really cool. And then, I mean, even if they are meeting on the regular, and that was even something that I think I talked about when I unpacked being at the haunt,
Mhm.
is this was the first year that really I did not feel it much, it being cold and flu season. And usually I do. Usually I try to cast a few extra heads because I know some are going to get the Portland croup, is what we always called it in downtown Portland. I mean, offices seem to joke about that. I don't know if you guys joke the same way in the retail area because,
Yeah,
yours was right around the corner. Yeah, the Portland
they
croup.
called it the apple plague.
The apple plague. See, everybody calls it something different because we know that we spread germs so freaking regularly that this happens every year. So this also just goes back to I personally get frustrated and I don't understand why people would fight not spreading their germs for a little bit. Like I really don't understand like the control issues to the point. Like what are we going to do? Like what is somebody going to do with the fact that you're not spreading your germs? I mean, you'll get a phone and keep it on and you'll activate all of your house gadgets and things to listen to you constantly to hear, "Hi Alexa." But you think wearing a mask is somehow like I'm not understanding that part.
There's
Because
no logic.
really,
There's
yeah,
no
because
logic in
really the
it.
logic, the ask was always, can we just all keep our germs to ourselves until we get this under control? And I don't understand fighting that. But I don't know, maybe I always invite it. If you guys want to reach out to me through the group and be like, here's why, cool.
No, no, fuck them. I mean, I want to make it clear once again. While I do have anger at the actions of Republican politicians, I don't have anger with every single person who identifies as a conservative. I mean, there are plenty I'm going to disagree with, but I think that there are conservatives out there that view the pandemic as what it is and are actively, like the governor in Ohio, I believe, is a hardcore Republican governor, but he got a lot of shit because he, had mask mandates and whatnot. Just follow the
Yeah.
science. Don't kill your voters. And like yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and just to say, like, yeah, I invite that because we do have a lot of reasonable people that I assume are out there in this world that, and I'm open to it. I am always open to reading more about the thing I'm learning about. And right now, because the pandemic is relevant to me, I'm learning about it. I choose to spend some time learning about it.
Mhm.
So yes, if you do have anything that can give me any real reason to not wear
Well, Alex
masks, like
Jones told
I'm
me.
open to, oh God, no. See, and that's the thing. Now that is the thing that I've run into having a problem with is like they'll send me something and then I'll say, okay, but who is this source even?
Mhm.
And I'm not allowed to question their source, but I question my own sources because
Yeah.
that's how I vet information. That's how you vet information. If you've ever written a paper, like if you go back to English class, like back in high school, like they taught you to vet sources. I just continued doing it. And I feel like a lot of people don't because I could pick my most asinine opinion of opinions. And if I put the right words in the Google box, I will find something out there that supports it.
Yep.
I have like it's a funny personal story that I might share with you off of the air. But yeah, like this happens where it's like you want so desperately for somebody to just believe your opinion that you'll find something that supports it. You won't vet it yourself. And so not only have you maybe kind of hurt your relationship with that person, especially if they're the type of person that vets it, you've also kind of just done the thing that you shouldn't be doing, which is only looking up bias information to support that part in your brain. Like
Confirmational
you should
bias.
be vetting it. Yeah. But yeah, only looking up opinion bias articles is not going to expand your mind. It's just going to make you almost more stubbornly set in about it. And that's not the kind of brain I want. So no offense, but I'm going to check your sources if you send it to me.
Yeah, and especially too, it's like these articles you're saying are saying exactly the things you wanted to tell you. I wonder why. You
Yeah,
know,
and hey, if an article references a study, I know they're totes snooze fests, guys, but you can like just read the summary and skim through some of the information, like I may do with this mask wearing one. I don't know if I need to because I already feel pretty convinced that mask wearing's kind of the way to go. Like, not sure I need to read another one. I guess it would be different if somebody was trying to post something that says, like, here's where it doesn't help. Like, I would be more interested in digging into that one at that point because that actually is like a counter argument to my current belief.
yeah, and if there is, because yeah, like take the people that don't get the vaccine, like there's a common thing I see in social media to where, people that publicly come out and don't get it all must support conservatives and Republicans, but Ice Cube just turned down a movie with a $9 million paycheck because he didn't want to get the vaccine. Are you telling me he's a conservative? Come on. It's a much more complicated issue. We need
Yes.
we need to explore the various reasons why people are not, because like I think with Ice Cube, one factor to keep in mind is, like we mentioned on the show, the African American community in this country have very legitimate reasons to distrust medical professionals.
Exactly. I forget where I saw it before, but I did see like or take in at some point a really good interview that talked about the African American history with vaccines
Mm-hmm.
specifically. Like there is some fucking heartache there. Like, sorry guys, if it burst your bubble, we done some wrong in the past as a culture here to some select groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that those are the ones that I know now because that was something that was surprising to me. But that comes from a place of privilege, right? Because I
Yeah.
don't have that background. I have other background historically that we don't need to go into for this show. Like, as far as like America treating, certain groups not so great. But as far as that goes, like ever since I learned that fact, I do not go on my pro flu shot vaccine talk with somebody who is maybe against that and is a person of color, just because that is not something that I realize I couldn't really speak to that anymore.
Yeah.
I'll gladly talk about why I do it, but that's what's kind of nice about handling conversations that way anyway. If you're being clear about talking about just your own personal choices and you're not actually saying you need to do this because I do this,
Mm-hmm.
conversations go really well when you have diverse backgrounds. So it hasn't been a problem yet, but it is something I try to remain aware of because now that I've learned it, I can't unlearn it. And if you're curious about it, I encourage you to Google it. It's a very interesting history with that.
Yeah, yeah. We need to do a lot better, but let's talk about Big Mouth here.
Yay, meat and potatoes of the
Episode,
show.
yes, episode 3 of season 5, Love Bugs. What an episode. I mean, so far of the three, this is probably one of my favorites so far.
Yes, this was definitely when I took that sigh of relief because we don't know when Big Mouth is going to end.
Mhm.
So you get concerned that a show that you really like jumps the shark and then just keeps milking it, and then you lose interest before the show wraps.
Mhm.
And personally, I don't like that. To me, it really stinks because there's characters that I cared about that I want to know how they finish. So if a show jumps the shark too soon, there's like this weird, painful agony that I know I'm going to want to watch it later. But my normal tactic is I'll just stop watching it at that point and then wait for it to finish so I could just binge it.
Right.
So I was super refreshed when this episode came on. I was wondering if we had tapped the well of different hormonal slash representation characters, but lo and behold, we get introduced to the love bugs. And I know we've spoiled that already because I think Tim and I were both kind of excited about these characters. They do seem to have like a lot to them. and we'll get into it with this episode as we kind of go through the good and bad for me. But I really appreciated the kind of diversity of love that it's implied that the love bugs cover.
Yes. Now, speaking of that, let's hit the themes. I mean, falling in love at that young age too. A lot of times you're ending up possibly falling in love with a friend. I mean, these are difficult times because this is the first time you're experiencing stuff like this. But like the theme, like what do you remember about some of the first times you've fallen in love?
Oh my God, pain and misery. I just go back, go back to not being popular, guys. But yeah, I mean, I had also kind of a weird upbringing. I wouldn't put me up, I guess, with a lot of normal people in that sense because I had like a really inappropriate relationship when I kind of should have been falling in love with somebody my age. So not necessarily like the best memories of my early loves in life. So, but what about you? What about blossoming early romance for you?
Oh my God. If honestly, it wasn't until my 20s to where I really got comfortable talking to women. So
Wow, why does that not surprise me?
yeah, yeah. Like seriously, like I didn't have a girlfriend in high school. Not from, you know, lack of choices out there. I mean, because like growing up, especially in Grand Rapids, I would occasionally run into old like high school, classmates and whatnot. And they're like, one time there was a cheerleader, like I had such a crush on you. I was like, fuck.
Oh gosh. Okay, so that's funny how often that came up. Because yeah, like I had my little boyfriends and stuff, and even like through college. But as far as like what I felt like representing, like the whole like in love, like your first loves, like I just can't really think of any good examples that I have from childhood on that one.
Well,
But
I,
yeah, like yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned it on the show before here. It was during the breakup episode. One of our one of our recent playlist episodes, "Broken Hearts Are for Assholes," was the title. It was back in when I was in the fifth grade. There was a girl in the fourth grade. She was like one of the first girls I ever had any sort of a crush on, and then just to the point where like I was comfortable talking to her at recess, and that was a big deal. We would talk like by the slide, and that was super important and all that. But then, of course, her selfish parents just had to become missionaries and move to Papua New Guinea. So she ended up breaking my heart.
Oh gosh. Well, okay, so I do have kind of I don't remember like it being a big deal though, but it was like the cute like little kid type thing. Like you have your first little boyfriend or girlfriend at like day school or whatever. And I don't remember if I've told this story on the show because it goes to show like prefacing y'all, I'm from Texas, so this was not obviously anything that I believed. So one day my mother had gotten a call from my daycare saying that I was showing like alarming behavior on the playground. And my mother goes up to the daycare, and the alarming behavior was that I had started calling this certain little boy my boyfriend. But the problem was that he was black. That was literally the problem with it. So she got called there for that. Now I will give my mother credit as much as we don't get along or really talk now. I do remember her being super upset because I do remember the situation. It was really weird,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because those are the kind of things that like hang out. And I really liked him. Like he was like a neat guy. And I don't know, maybe we ate pebbles together. I don't exactly, I guess we just played a lot and I just started calling him my boyfriend. But I do remember her being called there. I do remember like we didn't go back to that daycare for a long time. And then when we went back, there was a certain teacher that I had noticed wasn't there anymore. So
Ooh.
yeah, I guess I was always a little bit of a rebel though.
Well, I mean, good on your mother for raising a stink.
Yes.
That even, especially in Texas, and hopefully, and I will give limited praise to that school for getting rid of that person. Hopefully they were not aware of it, and once they were made aware, they dismissed that person right away. Hopefully,
Well,
crossing
no,
fingers.
no, no. I said we didn't go back for a while. So I think
Okay.
what happened was that person either retired or left, and so then we went back.
Oh,
So no, 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 not progressive. Don't give Texas credit. Not, and especially not like 20 years, like 20, 30 years ago, right? Like they're still kind of far behind now. They weren't nailing it back then either.
They're getting used to having thumbs. No, I'm kidding. No.
But yeah, like nothing at all like what was represented on the show. So, while I'm aware that that's like a phase that happens a lot, because I guess, you see it. You see
Mm.
everybody being cute and like trading their little notes and having their little falling in love and like, oh, you two just seem so into each other, which is actually something that was said to like some of the characters in this episode. So I'm aware of like the lovey-dovey feelings, but yeah, that was a theme that totally missed on me in that sense.
Now, did you ever in grade school do the whole making a box that you would put on your desk on Valentine's Day and then pass Valentine's around to other students? Okay.
Yes, we did. Sorry, I just very dramatically physically responded by pretending I was done with this world. Uh, yes, that being said, yes, we had that stuff. And that it's part of those reasons that I would never want to be involved in public school again,
Mm.
because it's just those weird secretive ways that sometimes kids can be mean. And this is obviously my experience. Not everybody was bullied to the level that I was bullied as a kid. But yeah, like I would either get nothing, or years that I got like a significant amount, it was usually because I was the one they decided to pick on that year, right? Like there's somebody on the lower end of the pecking order, and there was a rotation between like me and three other kids. And yeah, every now and then I would get a bunch of stuff. And of course, like there's that hopeful child that like thinks like, yay, this is the year I don't suck. And then you read them and it's like, oh, okay, I smell like butts. Got it. What about
Yeah.
you? What was your experience with that? Because you did that too then, right?
We did. And yeah, I mean, thinking back on it, like, why push young kids into thinking about that stuff at that young of age? I don't get now, in terms of the Valentine stuff. But for me, it's like, passing it around, like I would get some, but they would always just be like a person like signing their name inside of like those little silly cards that you would get on Thanksgiving. No personal notes, nothing like that. It's just like people
Yeah.
nice because they had to do it. But also me, like fifth, sixth grade when it's happening, like a girl signed it. She must like me. Yeah, because my favorite.
Okay, Ralph Wiggum.
That's the thing. That's my favorite episode of The Simpsons. Like because that episode spoke to me so
Yeah, it,
much.
it is precious, by the way, because I loved Ralph Wiggum in that episode. As much as I'm not a huge Hella Simpsons fan. That's a cute one. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and it was those things too, though. But see, kids are creative and they will write in any space given. So even though it was like mostly taken up with like a lollipop and a picture of Barbie, like so every now and then there'd still be something shitty like scrawled somewhere tiny. And it goes back to I get that that wasn't most people's experience. But
Well, it's
yeah.
possible too. It's possible too that, like maybe girls are just not as much assholes as guys. So the girls that put the Valentine's cards in my box weren't going to say you're a dick, or something like that.
Oh man, I don't know. Girls are pretty vicious, but maybe it's because a lot of the culture is to be against themselves. So,
Yeah. Anyway, now one thing that they touched upon in the show too that is always like a tricky tightrope walk is that time to where it's possible you fall in love with a friend.
yes.
And Connie even had a wonderful song that was not the best of intentions type of song, but yeah, like how do you explain to kids like like how to deal with something like that? Because like when you're young, you're like it's like the feelings come and you don't always know how to express yourself, I guess, because like the ultimate, because as an adult, the one thing you would want to think of as an adult is like, this is my friend, but I'm having these feelings. Do I want to go through with these feelings and risk losing the friendship? A kid's not necessarily going to think of that. What do you think?
Well, I mean, really, friendships turning into relationships seems more natural to children just because they're really hanging around with the same peer group, for a long, long time, several years of their life, right? And they're graduating up. And now you'll have some shift around, and sometimes it changes. If you're a big enough area, you might go to a different school, like in high school. So I think that's where it starts, right? Because there's even high schoolers that quote unquote date high schoolers from other schools.
Hmm.
So you're meeting more people. You're in more of a position to be in a situation where you're actually getting to know somebody while trying to pursue something romantic. But like kids, it's almost natural that they would be friends first. So it just seemed like it made sense to cover the topic because they've very much been hanging out with the same people. They haven't had a lot of new kids. They've had one new kid that got everybody's attention.
Hmm.
um, but other than that, it totally suits that they would be, falling for each other as friends. I guess Missy and it's Devon with him, right? Because isn't
Yeah.
it that the girl's name is Devon and his name was Devon?
Yeah, but
Okay,
she pronounced it Devin. Yeah.
so they went by the Devons. Okay, I was remembering that right. That's an old callback to like I think season one. So yeah, so Missy, and maybe that's like because of the different like that caste system that I talk about in schools, right? Like they don't really know each other, but they are. So I would say that they're friends now too.
Yeah, I mean and like I think they've sort of Missy and Devon. I think they've sort of like last season, didn't they express some sort of interest in each other?
I right now it's at a will they won't they feeling was kind
Yeah,
of my general sense of it. Because he's talking to her, but at the same time it's like you have to realize there's a lot of that stuff that they have implied like goes on at their school with that kind of hierarchy. He dated Devin.
hmm,
So it might be that people don't see that as something that would even happen. I don't know. Like I find it interesting that nobody's commented on it in other situations where they have between two friends seeming to flirt a lot because Devin and or Devon and Missy do seem to talk. He was comfortable enough to walk up behind her at the pool episode to get a fuzzy off her back. And
yeah.
that seems like the type of stuff that you'd look like, it's like, ooh, he must like her. So I do kind of find it side interesting that nobody's commenting on those two.
Hmm. Not and no spoilers. Not even later in the season. They don't really talk about
Um, I can spoil it, but I'm gonna not right now
it.
because
Oh,
if there's no
fair.
need to, I don't think it pays. But I do think it's interesting just that nobody's talking about those two, even though they've been interacting more. And it seems like they're quick to comment on anybody else.
Hmm.
Like even Lola and Jay when they first started talking, or Lola and Andrew when that first became like, why those two? Like they've even commented on why not. But there seems to be like a little bit of distance on that in this. Either it's on purpose because the children aren't interested in talking about it, or the writers are holding out. But either way, it was just interesting to me to kind of notice like that they put that emphasis on other characters, but nobody's talking about those two right now.
Yeah. Now, one thing I found interesting with the Love Bugs, and it kind of worked with both Nick and Jesse. Nick in terms of his burgeoning love for Jesse, and Jesse for her thing with Allie, is that the lack of communication. I really loved how the love bug, like there was like one point, I think I wrote it in my notes, like where the Jesse touched Nick, and the love bug's like, she's touching your arm. Isn't that exhilarating? And it's
Yes.
like they're experiencing all this positive stuff, yet they're also not trying to roughly communicate that to the other person as well. They're trying to pretend we're still friends while still having that. Like, how do you broach like with a kid? Do you know like how well, like what advice would you give them on that?
Oh my gosh.
Like, how do you deal? Like, how would you deal if you found yourself in a scenario? I guess.
Well, I mean, like, what was if I found myself in a scenario where I'm trying to explain like those
Well, like
feelings
if
to a kid, or
no, like no, like if you were like in Nick's spot, like
mm,
how would you tell? How would you be able to relate to a kid? How to be able to take these feelings and be able to express them in a way that doesn't hurt a friendship or could possibly start something else? I guess.
oof. See, that's hard advice to give, right?
Mhm.
Because that's going to depend on the family culture of the other human involved
Mhm.
to also be the type that is okay with like having certain conversations and stuff like that. Because it goes back to in the world where the Reverend is raising a child, I want to be the kind of home that has more conversations where it's a little bit normalized to talk about relationship dynamics. And I'm not talking about sex, by the way. I'm talking about relationship dynamics. Like, I'd like to hope that, having decades of experience on working with other people and maintaining friendships, that hopefully I can groom the type of relationship with my own kid where maybe they can ask me my advice in
Right.
general. So I don't know. And that's probably, I don't know how, I mean, I don't have kids in my life every day,
Yeah.
to have kind of that access right now. Um, but that's kind of the sort of dynamic between child and parent that I personally just think is healthier and would make it less awkward to have these conversations. Cause yeah, like right now, I guess the closest child I would have to that is my stepdaughter. And granted, I do think, she and I do have the relationship that if she were, in my presence on a day to day and had questions about a friend, and she would probably feel comfortable tugging my ear about it. And there was one situation where something came up because she was really upset that one of her friends was not texting her back. And lo and behold, looked at the phone. It's like, well, honey, this phone number is missing a number. So even teaching little ways of the benefit of the doubt, and I could just see how that plays into the bigger part here, where relationships and how complex they are, and even looking at it like Jesse's situation where she was honestly feeling a little confused at first, like,
Mhm.
but they don't have any adults that they feel comfortable talking about these things to, even though it's like they could easily assume that these adults did go through this and could maybe have some insight for them. So I don't know how well it would go if I like plopped down a random kid and tried to talk to them about, maybe don't read into it when somebody touches your hand, but enjoy those feelings and maybe be curious about them instead of reactive to them. So I think it's more teaching it in general rather than trying to sit and have an awkward conversation as things come up. And it's the reactive parenting that's not my favorite style, which is what we seem to do. So
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I get that. And yeah, I mean, it's falling in love is just crazy overall. And, it can be tougher too if you do, quote unquote, fall for a friend or something like that, because, like, yeah, when you do fall in love, like the Lovebug show, you don't always think everything through. You're just enjoying, you're riding the waves of the
yeah.
oxytocin and whatnot. And, ultimately, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say whenever finger up is just whenever you're
Okay,
done
okay, go
wrapping
ahead.
up that thought. But just really like, but again, those are good things to teach kids like in general, not even romantically. Like we put so much emphasis on sex and romance with kids that I
Mhm.
think that we forget that a lot of these things could be taught about relationships in general. Think about a friend you've lost and how devastating that could be, like just platonic, non-romantic, very close friends, and how gutting that can be. And like even how sometimes, when friendships don't work out and how like mean they can be afterwards, that can even relate to how dealing with like breakups and how people can be after a breakup. So I think it just goes back to normalizing the emotional talks and not necessarily being so caught up on the sexualness of romance, because there's more relationship to romance than sexuality to romance. But because we've kind of interweaved these topics and made them all uncomfortable, we don't feel comfortable talking about them at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people think only relationship is only the physical aspect, and that's really more the icing on the cake. It has to be
Yeah.
everything else for the physical stuff to be good, you know?
Yes. But I did love the love bugs. I did kind of relate to that in a sense, I think, about like the reading into things. So, I got that to a point. I also get like I did love like how almost irrational the love bug was, right? Because that also goes into, if you've ever looked into what your brain does, like early in relationships, there's actually a lot of chemical changes that are going on. And
Mhm.
so a lot of those intense feelings and intense interest is actually a result of those chemicals. So that can even lead into the excessively reading into every little brush of the arm, right? So I thought that was really cool that they went into it in that way. And then we haven't gone, let's see, Sonia is the other one, right? The other love bug. There's Walter that was Nick's
Oh
love
yeah,
bug.
yeah. I know there were two love, but I forgot the characters, the love bug character names. So
Yeah, so Walter is, because we're going to bring them up a lot because they're going to be around for a minute. So Walter is Nick's love bug, and then Sonia is the one that's been done set to Jesse, which
Mhm.
you didn't know at the beginning that Jessie was actually going to have her love bug be somebody else. It almost implied like that they were spinning up to them falling in love together. And
Mhm.
then they drew a curveball. Like I thought that was interesting, by the way, because Jessie was actually pretty flirty when he was reading into it. Like it kind of almost felt like I didn't know if they were making it so we were reading into it as well, because they do that sometimes in the show, where it seems like they have the reality play out to how a character is experiencing things
Yeah.
versus not. And they get more like literal to that, with the song that he sings to her. Yeah, because that was this episode.
Yeah. I'm glad I've never
So
done that.
so it, like, but see what I mean? Like, because at first we were seeing that moment from his perspective, but then, and we'll go into that more later, but then we did unveil it though, but they don't always unveil what it actually was, because they've done a similar thing where they've like revealed how reality was, like with Lola and Jay. Like there was a thing where she did the looking and everything was like an oasis, and then Devin said something to her and she looked and then she saw the reality of the situation, or it was him that saw it. It was
The
one of those two.
backyard, the pools. Yeah.
Yes, the backyard with the pool. Like it looked like this awesome mansion, and then somebody burst their bubble, and then they really saw that it was like a mud pit, and Lola's fighting the dog for ribs, you know. So that was something that caught me with this episode because I felt like I was led on by Jesse.
Well, also having said that, though, I mean, I did like how, like the scene that stuck most with me was like there was a scene, and I think it was Allie's bedroom, to where Allie's on her bed and Nick and Jesse are like making signs on the ground, and I think that may have been the hand touching scene, and then Allie made it like comment like, "Get a room, you two," and then like Jesse reacted like just like she wasn't offended, but it was just like, it's just not true. Okay, whatever. But then Nick was, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. But how he was saying it, and it's like, I, I thought that was beautiful because I think it showed both the reality of what was happening as well as Nick kind of still in his head creating a slightly different version of what happened, because he took it as, like this is happening, she must really like it because other people are noticing it, when Jesse just touched his arm.
Yeah, and it's almost like she was open to it maybe up until this episode, and that can happen too, right? Because he kind of like gets a little weird like as the episode continues with her. But she seemed not appalled by the idea, because it was even brought up to her about, well, he could look like Judd when he's older. And even the hormone monstress responded to that being a good point, right? So it did kind of throw me how things progressed in this episode, but
Also, too, I mean,
yeah.
it's also too like her burgeoning love for Allie at this point is still very much new, so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to think of other options. Like, why? Like, she's already in the past had a short relationship with him, so the fact that they're still talking and whatnot, and in high school, it's possible that never say never, I guess.
Oh, exactly. But with Sonia, I did love the explanation about platonic love feelings and how that bond can be, quote, as strong, end quote, as romantic love.
Mhm.
So that would have been like that variety of love that I felt they did a good job with. I really appreciate that the love bugs are also like they incorporate platonic love, like the non-sexuality of it, because they're not the hormone monsters. This is something different. So they're not going to be sexually driven. And I thought that was really great how they kind of got to capture that in this episode.
Yeah, like the English language in a lot of ways is not really as rich as people like to think it is, especially when it comes to love. Because English, we just have love, even though there are very much many different kinds of love. And yeah.
Well, that was something they actually taught at the Christian university I went to, because, agape is like the friendship love. And so we had this whole like, I agape you, like we were being silly when we had learned about it. And then there's also like the five love languages, but that's not necessarily like words for love, but it is different ways to express and be loved.
Mhm.
But we don't have different terms for all those different things. We just have a book that explains there's different ways to do it. But but yeah, like we don't have like something like I love in my friend sense. We just have I love and then we clarify in a friend way. Or I care about you platonically, but
Which
we don't
is
have
weird
different levels.
because yeah, because like if like yeah, like I have a friend that I've known for over 10 years. She lives in California, and like we it to me, I got no problem telling her I love her because like she knows what I mean by that.
Right.
It's all about, I guess, normalizing those conversations over time so that it doesn't feel awkward because yeah, because the English language is not as rich and colorful as other languages. It can feel awkward. I get that, but it would just be nice to be able to be in a spot to where you could just say I love you and then not have to explain it because the other person knows what you mean.
Right. Like our language, unfortunately, is restricted in that sense so that we have to explain more. Rather, other languages have different terms for those levels of love.
Yeah,
And
we mean aloha.
speaking of saying what you mean, I thought the whole situation between Matthew and Aiden was like so dead on representative. And then it goes back to it's sad because you see it still happen to adults. Adults do this all the fucking time. And it drives me nuts. But essentially, he he concocted a fight. He decided he didn't want to be in the relationship anymore. And instead of being honest, he picked a fight and made Aiden, quote unquote, break up with him. And I super loved Aiden's exiting line. Like just something along the lines of, just so you know, even though you're making me do it, you're still the one that's dumping me.
Yeah.
Like, don't put this on me because you're still the one doing the actions. And I was like, yes,
And
this
that
is
does,
something.
yeah, and that does kind of tie into another theme on the episode, kind of thinking about others, while you're in a relationship and whatnot. I've definitely been in definitely been in those shoes, Matthew's shoes before, and I think for me, like the times where that has happened, it's like you don't realize you're doing it because you're so emotionally wrapped up in your own hurt that you're not realizing that your actions are probably causing more hurt than they're helping, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. But like as far as fantasizing about other people and if that hurts something.
No, I was talking in regards to the breakup thing, not about yeah,
Causing picking a fight to have a breakup. Yeah,
yeah.
it's something that I've never personally done. Um, Granted, there was a really good stint of my life where I got dumped. I didn't start breaking up with people until I was in my adult ages, like out of college. I think was the first time I actually broke up with somebody. Or no, in college. That's right. Like I broke up in college, but like all through like the early years, I was the one typically getting a note in my locker saying, "Oh shit, you suck." And like we're done. Because that's how breakups happened in my high school. You got a note, or every now and then the weirdest thing that I think ever happened was the girl who had a crush on my boyfriend was sent to break up with me by my boyfriend, and she had the weirdest shit-eating grin when she came up to me. Like she was happy to deliver me this news, and I'm like, A, you're supposed to be my friend, and B, I know you like him. But
See, why
anywho,
don't you think that's a problem that he's sending you to do his dirty work?
like, isn't that weird? Like, do you think this is like an application process and like you're gonna be next? Tag, you're it.
Yeah, I mean, like, good luck to her, I guess. I mean, maybe they're married and he's an assistant manager at a Hardy somewhere. I don't know.
So yeah, that being said, I don't know. I've just been good in that sense of just talking about when there's problems in that way. Um, I've never had that happen though, where it's like I just decided I was done to the point that I was just going to pick a fight because I didn't know how to break up with them.
Like when I said it's happened to me, like I've never had a thing in my head where I've said I'm going to start an argument to intentionally get a result that I want.
Right.
It wasn't that. It was again just finding myself so emotionally whatever that when a situation did occur, I would get butthurt over the smallest things, things that were
Hmm.
totally irrelevant, things that had nothing to do with the person whatsoever. But of course, it was the other person's fault. You
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's where I was at. But let's go into the other thing that kind of ties in with Matthew and Aiden here, and that's falling for others when you're currently in a relationship. And especially when you're a kid, like that can seem weird because, like, obviously in America, we have, monogamy is what is ultimately pushed overall to most people. And, when you're a kid, you don't get the little memo that just because you're in a relationship doesn't mean you're not going to fall for other people over time. It's how you deal with that. That's the thing, because if you're in a monogamous relationship and you've made that commitment, like, at what part is that relationship with that person appropriate and what part is it not, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to like some of the weird mentalities that I feel like we have around relationships, like that, we have a lot of language around love that implies that it's outside of your control. And therefore, if you're having any of the tingly feelings for somebody that you're not in a relationship with, therefore, it must mean that relationship should end. This is not something I agree with. This is something where I would just rather have a relationship with my partner where I can tell them, like, hey, like, I'm kind of a little attracted to somebody. I mean, I'm not wanting to act on it. I just wanted to talk to you about it because I'd just like to take the teeth out of that. And I
Mm,
have had that conversation before and it went down fine. They were okay with it. They were like, oh, well, okay, that makes sense. Like, I get it because talking to them about it makes them aware of it, which makes you aware of how you're treating that relationship.
mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I try to do things that put me on the path of not cheating on my partners. Because really, I don't want to betray them. So why put myself in a position where I can?
Yeah.
And it's something that doesn't feel like is normal in our culture to do, right? You're just supposed to shut up, maybe gossip with your friends about how you think this new office hottie is like wink worthy, and then you don't talk to your partner about it. And it's just something that genuinely confuses me and I think leads to more breaking up and the destruction of relationships than necessary. And I think a lot of it is around like that uncontrol, right? You fall in love. Well, falling isn't normally something you do on purpose,
Right.
right? Meanwhile, we don't have verbiage that implies that love is something that you groom. And so for me, fortunately, like, sure, have I had the, ooh, they're cute? Yes, but have I like groomed feelings and encouraged that while I was with somebody else when that wasn't the deal with the relationship I was in? Oh no, 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 no. I think that goes against a lot of my core beliefs that I've come up with relationships, like, being in the home that I was in and dealing with the shit that I dealt with. Like I had a lot of honesty clause that was required in my relationship. So
Yeah.
thankful for that decision. But yeah, like most crushes are just innocent. Like they don't mean anything. It's just your brain responding to literally how something looks
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know anything about them. And then that it doesn't have to be anything we read into, but because we put such an emphasis on feeling feelings and that it's supposed to mean something, that's where it's a mentality that I don't see with. So it's one that I don't quite understand why it ruins as many relationships as it does.
Well, a lot of times, if you think about it, I mean, it could be, insecurity, on somebody's part, because, like it could be something as simple as like it happens to everybody, a work time crush, just a fellow coworker that you think is hot, but for a fact that apart from the interactions you have with that person with them at work, you're not going to really do anything yet, like with stuff like social media, for instance. If you happen to add that person on, what if you had a partner that would, like, like look over your shoulder, like, who are they? And it's yeah, like, it's like myself. I've never cheated. Like, like I said before, like, you make a commitment to somebody, you stick with that commitment. Now, I wish I'd known in my marriage it was okay to say, it's okay to leave, if something's bad, and sticking around for 14 years is not good, Tim. But it's you just don't cheat. But having said that, feelings come, and like myself, I'm polyamorous now. I've said that, and like it's not as much of an issue, but that doesn't mean it can't be either, because even in polyamorous relationships, issues of jealousy, issues of, like self-worth can be a big problem, and that can lead, to hurt, just as much hurt feelings, if not more, because it's suddenly more complicated with more people involved.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that in polyamory, one of the biggest myths is that you can't cheat. And yes, you can. You very much can, because all cheating is betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
And you can totally betray like your partner's trust and stuff like that. But yeah. Um go ahead.
No, yeah, I wasn't saying.
Oh, okay. I lost I know we were talking about polyamory versus monogamy and thinking of others. Oh, there we go, because falling in love, like the whole uncontrol of feelings. And really, like some of the reading, because I also do consider myself polyamorous. It's just, it's fun being told that you're not just because you're in a monogamous relationship right now, because that's what works for your life,
Right.
whatever. But a lot of what I learned about polyamory is that not all relationships are sexual in that world either. Like that doesn't it's not a requirement to be sexual with somebody that you may have a relationship with, because there's demisexual people, there's people of all across the queer rainbow that can be like polyamorous in ways. um so I really liked that message, that just because you have strong feelings for somebody doesn't necessarily mean that that relationship needs to be sexual, to still want to maintain that as a healthy relationship.
Exactly. I mean, like what I found for me with polyamory, what I've liked best is that it's allowed me over time to understand the importance of just letting a relationship become what it's meant to become. Because if you are meant to ultimately just be friends with somebody and not, be in a sexual relationship with them or something like that, consider yourself lucky. You still got the person in your life. How is that a bad thing whatsoever? Because like we put so much emphasis on these labels, relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, when it's just the how, when you, like you said before, when you create a relationship with someone, that is just the what you are creating with that person. It's that how you deal with that person on a daily day-to-day basis, that is your relationship. Whether it's sexual or not is a different story altogether, but just maintaining and appreciating the fact that you can have that relationship, and not, most importantly, not trying to force it to become something that it's just not meant to be.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that was one of my larger takeaways, reading. One of my favorite books is like, I think it's like The Eight Things I Wish I Knew About Polyamory Before I Fracked It Up,
Mm-hmm.
by Cunning Minx, who was a podcast I was listening to during my divorce. That's kind of how I learned about polyamory.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it because of the communication level involved. And it goes back to, we're seeing that even stretching back in childhood, some of these issues that we very much can relate to as adults, but we remember happening as kids too. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not communicating and outgrowing some of these childlike behaviors. Picking a fight to break up, I would say that's pretty childlike behavior. Even
Yeah.
like the interestingness of just bottling up and not talking about feelings feels kind of childlike to me.
I mean, it can also be a defense mechanism, of a person. And I think the person that is, exhibiting those behaviors should take time to really self reflect on their actions and whatnot. But
Yeah.
different story for a different day. We got one more theme here to discuss, and that's interpersonal conflict. One thing that really stood out that I liked was the little bit of business between Missy and Jesse when it came to Missy's club, and how, interpersonal relationships, even with just simple friendships, can sometimes be destroyed because you don't take the time to be empathetic, to think about the other person, and whatnot. So when it came to like that, what are some parallels in your life that you've experienced that have been somewhat like as it was showed in the episode?
Oh,
Too many.
so I think, well, I think the thing that I think of most is, and it goes into, I've seen more into the future. So I know some of the situations that's happening right now, Jesse specifically reflects on later and kind of does see that she maybe was kind of a dick in some of these situations, dealing with Missy taking over the group because, Missy is very much that type of person that wants to deal with things by procedure,
Hmm.
right? And Jesse is very much more the I want to deal with things by being loud and saying I need to be heard now. And the unfortunate thing that's happening is they're treating each other like each other's way of dealing with things is wrong, when really I think it works better when you have all types of people like that working on things, because you do have people working on the long game, more procedural, more, you file the thing, you get a approval to go do a thing at a game down the road or whatever. But then there is also a lot to your right to speak,
Hmm.
the freedom of speech and your right to like protest. And I think both of those things are beautiful. And the thing that makes me sad is when each side like makes the other feel like their approach is wrong, when really they're both fighting the same fight. But it's like if you have, look at like war. If you have all like frontline infantry and no people like in tanks or like doing stuff from far away, like that's not a very good strategy for attacking a problem and defeating it. So it just always bums me out. So it was interesting watching it play out. I don't know how realistic it is, um, for this to be happening, like as far as taking over a group, like at their age.
At their age, sure. I mean, I've definitely experienced it with former people that were involved in the show here. But
Yes, how
that's
things
a different
can
story for
can
a different
go.
day. Yeah.
But yeah, so that was one of those topics I didn't write many notes about it. I think it's because it was taking me out of it again. It was a little bit over the edge of
Of what
n-
kids would do. And I
yeah, like I don't see them completely taking over her group in that age group. But does it happen? Have I seen things like that happen? I not to the level where I was directly involved, but I believe it does. It totally makes sense that it does.
yeah, and I get that point. I did like Missy's response. I shouldn't say I like it, but I can relate to it. How she was offended, but she didn't really talk about it with Jesse right away. She kind of bottled it in, which is major foreshadowing to what they're going to have down the road. And in like a lot of ways, I felt bad too because Missy normally is the one that will confront a person and have that conversation. So in a lot of ways I love the choices that they made that with Missy in this particular instance, but yeah, like interpersonal stuff can definitely be tough over time, and I think the big takeaway is just don't get too excited to where you start taking over other people's things, you know.
Yeah, like there's definitely like if somebody started a group and they're wanting to handle it procedurally, like maybe don't take over their group or
Mhm.
try to figure out like, okay, well, while you're doing this, can we also take a small group of people and protest this game? But especially because she had Allie like right there at her side, right? So she had that empowerment of a
Mhm.
somebody also voting, yay, let's do this, and that gets you excited and can kind of accidentally mow people over. So I don't really think Jesse meant to. I think a lot of it is just succumbing to those reactive like instincts
Mhm.
and not necessarily being curious about why she feels strongly about doing things and just acting on them.
Yep, indeed. Now, what good did you find in the episode? What stood
I
out to you
mean,
being really good?
yeah, I think we kind of covered it. I love the love bugs, so we don't need to go into them again. Going back to, I like the at least acknowledging platonic love and its importance. I liked, like I said, the fight between Matt. I think I accidentally covered my good stuff, like kind of talking about the general themes of it. I do want to put it out there though that I love that for some reason Maury's penises somehow never get old for me. As much as they're featured, I kind of thought early on in the series that this was going to be like the thing that annoyed me the most. But they're so playful about it, and there'll be one that's like really cute or one that's like old and weird. I even thought the seminar episode, like that was the prior one where they did the seminar scene.
Yeah.
But in this one, it was the like my little kid selling Girl Scout cookies or whatever. I thought that was cute. They managed to pull it off, and it doesn't make sense because it's been brought up so much. So I love that I'm still enjoying them.
Yeah, I mean, they can be hit or miss for me. Mostly hits. I think with the last episode they did show the Edge, the penis Edge, the penis version of the Edge, the guitar player from U2 again,
Oh,
which yeah, you didn't need to do that. But as far as me with the likes, I mean, I've already discussed it myself, the Lovebugs. But one thing I failed to mention that I really liked too is how Nick's love bug made him see the future. That's I
oh,
think that's one thing with
fantasizing, right?
yeah, like that used to be a big nasty habit of mine, thinking 50 steps ahead. It's like you get this sudden rush of the NRE hitting, and then all of a sudden, you're like planning a wedding, you know?
And for those who are not poly acronym friendly, NRE stands for New Relationship Energy. And that
Yeah.
goes back a little bit ago where I said there's actually scientifically like stuff that happens in your brain. So that's actually a term you can look up if you were curious about that concept at all. Um, but yeah, did you have anything else good to note about the episode? I do have like a bad, but it's not going to take me too long to do.
No. Like I said, we already discussed it with like the theme was the same thing as the scene here. So I mean, we talked about it, but just the love bug was extremely well done, and it hit so close to home.
Oh God, like too close.
Yeah.
Um, I'll go into my bad for the episode if we're ready for that.
Yep.
I am so over Andrew's ass. But I go back to thinking that he's being written to be very intentionally just gross and unnecessary. And this episode really seemed to focus on it more than usual. And so it just really grated me. Like it didn't need to be brought up as much, like this bowl of chowder, which is funny because we started making those references like in my home. Like we make fun of his ass jokes, but like when I watch the episode, I'm like, oh my God, this is painful. Why? Why? Are there guys out there really that are just that proud of how big their butt is? Like I've never heard of this being a bragging point for anybody.
I don't know. Like anytime anybody has ever told me you've got a nice butt, I'm like, why? It's flat. It's just there. A butt is a butt is a butt, you know?
Yeah, like I
And
got compliments on my butt like in high school. And like I think the thing what was odd was the way he said it pointed out how weird it was that we're obsessed with him. But he had said something super classy like, she's got a nice shitter. And I was like, yeah, exactly. I poop out of that. Like, why do you care? What does this do for you? Like,
yeah, wow, nice shitter.
but the Texas charm, right? But anywho, yeah, I don't know why they're very stuck on it. I almost feel like there's like an inside joke to this, like, but it's exclusive to the writers and that I'm not understanding it. But I don't see the value in the humor around his butt.
And we have the third episode here to where once again Andrew is becoming just if not more of a caricature than like Lola. I mean, who is at this like as he's just degraded in so many levels from becoming a realistic character to just being a joke.
Right, like he is either a child who is really struggling like with some aggressively sexual symptoms to other issues, or his character just makes less and less sense every day.
Yeah, exactly. Me for the bad, I didn't like the woke storyline that they tried to put in here. And I don't like using phrases like that all the time because I know that can trigger some people. What I mean is this: I think they could have accomplished showing the interpersonal conflict between Missy and Jesse without having the racist school stereotype that they did. And it just felt like they were looking for an excuse to show that. And I think they could have kept almost everything the same way without having an unneeded racial joke. The racial joke did nothing for the story whatsoever. They weren't making a comment about, sports teams using racist, iconography for their logos. It wasn't about that. It was about the, Jesse and Missy and how they were. So I just didn't care for that. It was like they were trying to make a point about patting themselves on the back for being against stuff like that while still very much doing it. It didn't serve a purpose. It's again like the scene from Die Hard that always annoys me. It was just like that. They could have accomplished everything without having that silly side story of the racist school mascot. They could have done anything else.
I will say, like, part of my summary, and I could just loop this up. This was some of the goods I think I technically missed, but for some reason my notes were below my summary part. Is this episode had some solid one-liners, and one of my favorites was Lola saying, "Pop it, lock it, pick that pocket." I was like, that's so funny. It made me laugh so hard. The Lovebug song, feeling like your heart farted in a bubble bath for some reason that like got me giggling. And then Jesse's dad, I wish my butthole tasted this sweet. But you bringing up the gypsy like reminded me of like, oh yeah, there was that line from Lola that I like had me just slayed. And I don't know why. There was just something so great about like how they did it with the visual of her pop locking it.
That reminded me of the first episode this season when she did the meow, 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 meow. I'm a cat who likes to
Like to
fuck.
suck, which is weird because you heard Rick sing that at the beginning of that episode, and then Lola did it later, and so it kind of did that weird thing where it like crosses the threshold of being realistic because
Yeah.
she wasn't there for that. But they openly make fun of that they do that all the time. So, but anywho, so that being said, like I guess like for that one line, I liked that storyline, but that's not really worth it. Like there were other they're funny in other ways. I could have lived without Pop It, Lock It, Pick That Pocket, but it did get me giggling pretty solidly.
All right. So, what is your score for the episode?
I gave it an 8 out of 10. Liked it a lot, but not quite enough to give it a perfect score. It goes back to I really loved the touch on the subject of platonic love versus romantic love, and how Jesse being confused about it kind of shows how little we talk about relationships and feelings. But the ass obsession on Andrew really threw a shitty shadow over the entire episode for me. Just when I'd forget I was annoyed, it would come up again, which is honestly, it knocked it down two for that reason alone.
Mm.
I think I would have easily given it a 9 if it just hadn't been brought up so much that it just made me like I would struggle to rewatch the episode because of just how annoying it was and how much it was brought up just unnecessarily. But then it goes into the other redeeming quality being a lot of solid little laughable one-liners, like across the board from the monsters to the love bugs to Jesse's dad. So, what about you? What did you score it?
I give it a 7 out of 10. So far, the best episode of the season. Obviously, I haven't really gone through thoroughly in depth, so we'll see if that stands. But there's more good than bad here. Like the bad parts that yeah, I didn't care for the Andrew stuff either, even though that didn't really stick out enough to make a note about it. But yeah, I don't see a 13-year-old boy. I don't see a 45-year-old man really caring about what their ass looks like. you know?
It's just
Yeah,
not a stereotype that I'm aware of, so it kind of pulled me out of this one. Like it's going back to they're making Andrew either too ridiculous or they need to explain something.
yeah. Overall, the good stuff far outweighed it. I mean, the fact that we've been able to get so much content talking about it, it shows how good that is because the touch
Yeah,
on
they
these things.
cover so much that's just fucking relatable.
Mm.
Even if it's not something that you experience directly, I still understood that these things happen. So I love that hopefully this is and it's easy even kind of seems that some of the purpose of this is to
Mhm.
kind of break some of those layers down. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Of like maybe we should be having these conversations with kids because they seem really confused about it and we're not doing well at letting them just figure it out on their own. So maybe this is something that parents should step in on, which seems to be kind of an underlying vibe I get from the show, especially because there are a lot of things where they successfully pull my nostalgia of remembering it as a kid, but I also recognize that it's still happening in our adults too.
Yeah, and maybe if we did have those conversations with kids on the regular, when they grow old, they will hopefully have to have those conversations less with their kids. I mean, that doesn't mean there won't be conversations, but if we make it easy to talk, it will be easy to talk.
Exactly, because if we can break the code and figure out like just how to talk to our families and help each other out, Because it goes back to, you don't have to treat them like you're giving them advice on every single tiny thing and decision they have to make. Teach them how to be troubleshooters. Teach them how to have conversations with trustworthy sources when they've got questions. And hopefully you can angle it where you're that trustworthy source.
Yeah, and just most importantly, when it comes to kids, especially teaching communication. I mean, because if they feel comfortable talking to an adult, they're going to feel comfortable talking to their friends as well, and they're going to feel comfortable if they do get these feelings to have those healthy conversations to either explore something if the other person wants to explore, or to just let that little candle die out. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. And that was funny because that actually made me think when we were talking about like when you do talk to somebody. I've even had it happen. Like, I don't like dating coworkers. I just think it's complicated and it's weird. So there was somebody I was really good friends with, and I had kind of some feelings for her, and I just decided to let them know. And I was like, I even prefaced it of, I don't really date coworkers. It's not something that I do, but I just putting it out there. And what was cool was they were not reciprocated. And that allowed it to die because we were both mature individuals and they didn't need to treat me strange for just being honest with them. So I wish we could practice more of this. Like, I do think we have an opportunity to try to normalize, like, teaching how to have relationships in general.
Yes, and even if that means a quirky little podcast like ours starts that ball rolling, we're here to help, folks.
Yes. We're awkward, but at least we're talking about it.
Damn right. Now, next week, if you're hearing this on the day this is released, next week is Christmas.
Woohoo!
Yes, so what we are going to do is talk about the Big Mouth Christmas special that happens in season 5. Now, this episode doesn't really tie in with the overall themes of the rest of season 5, which is why we're going to be taking it out of order. But not only are we going to be talking about that episode, but we're also going to be bringing up other Christmas stuff as well, I'm sure.
Yep, Christmas, New Year's, we're going to kind of cover the holidays. We're recording these ahead of time because I will be traveling. So it will be helpful to make sure we stay on a schedule for you guys. So we're going to try to pack it with some cool Christmas shit, maybe some of our music that we've listened to through the year, and maybe even talk about New Year's plans. We don't know. We're just going to get on there and see how our conversation as friends go. But I did hear I get to talk to a friend that I haven't been on the same show as in a minute.
And who is that?
Is Aubrey joining us for our Christmas one?
Not the Christmas, but New Year's.
Okay. So we'll do New Year's with Aubrey then. So we'll have Christmas and then New Year's.
Yes, the professor, as we record this tomorrow, will have an all-day meeting. So that's something she's not going to be able to break out of. But she definitely, since we're going to be talking about music on New Year's, we might as well just say it now. What we're doing on New Year's is another playlist episode. Spotify has a thing that I love called the Spotify Wrapped, which they will make a custom playlist for you of your top 100 played songs that you played on Spotify throughout the year. And what we're going to do is just go through our top 5 and talk about why those songs ended up being played so much.
Exactly. So that's the lineup from your friends here at Friends Talking Nerdy. I know we don't always give a lead into what our shows are going to be about, but at least you'll know what's coming up for the holidays for us.
But when we do,
we over-explain the fuck out of it.
Yes. Nothing wrong with that. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Every Wednesday and Saturday in this podcast space, we will have something to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
Fare thee well, my folks.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.